In the house of the village chief, a little man sat on a pillow, flanked by two guards sitting on their knees. All three had masks that looked very similar. The little man in the middle was the chief, and he said,
"Hello there. I'm the chief of this village, Takikuhara Tekken. Very nice to meet you. I may be the smallest in this village, but I am also the best at my craft."
Stretching out a hand, the chief said,
"Now, bow your head so low it touches the mat."
As Tanjirou heard these words, he dropped to his knees and bowed with a thud of his forehead on the floor, screaming,
"Kamado Tanjirou, very honored to meet you."
He was genuinely in awe, inspired by the village chief. The village chief sounded pleased as he spoke again.
"What a good boy. Now come over here and take some dough cakes."
He lifted the bowl and stretched it in the direction of Tanjirou. Tanjirou jumped up and walked up to the chief. He knelt in front of the chief. He took the bowl of cakes and said,
"Thank you so much."
The village chief waited for Tanjirou to eat his cake, studying his face and how he held himself. He was pleased with what he saw. After Tanjirou ate his second cake, the village chief spoke again.
"Hotaru has gone missing right now. We are doing our best to look for him, so please be patient."
He slightly bowed his head in apology to Tanjirou. Tanjirou paused eating the cakes and asked,
"Hotaru?"
He didn't recognize the name and was confused by the chief's actions. The village chief nodded and said,
"Yes, Haganazuka Hotaru."
with a gush of pride. Tanjirou started eating again, smiling. He said,
"What a cute name."
He was struggling to not giggle. The village chief sounded proud as he said,
"I'm the one who gave it to him."
Then the chief's voice sounded angry.
"But he keeps badmouthing me, since he says it's too cute."
The village chief shook his fist in anger, not addressing anyone in particular. Tanjirou, with a full mouth.
"That's pretty sad."
His voice didn't match his words. The chief nodded and continued.
"He's always been like this ever since he was a child. He always throws tantrums right away, then he goes off somewhere. Sorry about that."
The chief sighed in exasperation. The two guards looked at the ground and sighed as well. Tanjirou cried out, feeling guilty.
"Oh, no, no. I'm the one who ends up either breaking the sword or chipping it."
He didn't want there to be bad blood on his behalf. The village chief sharply cut Tanjirou off.
"No. You are wrong."
Tanjirou was taken aback by the sharpness of the outburst. Seeing Tanjirou's reaction, the chief calmed down and lowering his voice he angrily said,
"It's his fault for creating a sword that could actually break."
Tanjirou felt intimidated by the little man. He held the bowl of cakes with both hands. The pressing aura making him question if the little man was really that little. The guard next to the chief spoke up.
"As soon as we find him, we'll seize him and bring him over. So don't worry about anything."
He sounded sure of himself and was trying to encourage Tanjirou and back up the chief. Tanjirou gasped and stammered out.
"Please don't be so violent."
He didn't want anyone hurt on his behalf. The village chief ignored Tanjirou's words.
"I heard your body has still not recovered enough to be sent out into the field. So if Hotaru doesn't forge your sword by then, we'll have someone else do it."
The chief sat up straight and proudly proclaimed,
"The hot springs in our village does wonders for the body. So please spend some time there."
With that, Tanjirou was escorted out of the chief's home. As Tanjiro got escorted towards the springs, he thought,
"I hope they don't fight with each other."
He didn't like being the cause of conflict. The guard leading Tanjiro through the village to the far edge pointed to a sign that said "Spring" on it and said,
"The spring is at the top of this hill. I will be preparing your meal down here."
He bowed and left Tanjiro on his own. Tanjiro said,
"Okay, thank you,"
and started walking up to the springs. But before he made it halfway up, he heard a woman running and crying down the hill towards him. Kanroji was running down the stairs and crying.
"Ah, it's Tanjirou, Tanjirou."
She was flailing her arms all over, tears were running down her face. Tanjiro froze in his tracks, and started to wave his arms.
Oh, please be careful, your breasts are going to spill out.
He was embarrassed in advance. Kanroji dropped to her knees right in front of Tanjiro and wailed.
Listen, I got ignored. I greeted him, and he ignored me.
She was flailing her arms around and crying. Tanjiro got a little irritated.
Who did?
He didn't want anyone to be mean to anyone. Kanroji sniffled and continued wailing.
I don't know, I asked his name, and he ignored me. Isn't that just cruel? I'm a pillar.
Burying her face in her hands she cried.
Now all that good energy I got from coming out of the spring is completely gone. Wah, wah, wah.
She was full of sorrow and regret for the lost aura. Tanjiro smiled reassuredly.
It looks like they'll be done with dinner soon. I heard they used matsutake mushrooms.
He was trying hard to cheer up the love pillar. Kanroji instantly changed in her mood. She, with tears still in her eyes, looked up at Tanjiro with a big smile on her face.
Whoa, you serious?
She sounded excited and already completely forgot about the slight from the man at the hot spring. She jumped up and sprinted down the path singing happily, the negative emotions not even a hint of a shadow on her soul. Tanjiro watched her confused as she disappeared down the hill. He had no understanding about what happened just now. Tanjiro turned back up the hill, kept walking up the path. When he arrived at the springs, he was impressed by how big it was. He was excited to relax and recover in the warm water. Out of nowhere, he got hit in the head of something. Catching it on the rebound off his hard head, he realized it was a tooth. This freaked Tanjiro out, and he shrieked, wondering who'd lose a tooth. Looking around, he saw Genya, the mohawk head. Calling out to him.
Shinagazugawa Genya.
Waving a hand in greeting, he smiled and tried to be friendly. Genya turned his head, then his body. Then Genya looked dead in Tanjiro's eyes and screamed at the top of his lungs.
Drop dead.
Tanjiro froze and couldn't think of what to say. He just stared at Genya with his mind blank from the insult and death wish. After standing confused for a few seconds, Tanjiro recovered his composure. He put down Nezuko's box, quickly got undressed and jumped into the spring, yelling.
It's been so long, how have you been? You have the same name as the wind pillar.
Genya, in one angry movement, jumped at Tanjiro and shoved his face under the water, roaring in anger.
Don't talk to me.
He quickly got out of the spring and stormed off, towards the village, still without clothing. Tanjiro soaked in the hot spring with a towel on his head. Talking to no one in particular as Nezuko got out of her box and swam around after the sun went below the tree line. Out loud he said.
I thought I could be friends with him since we were both in the nude. Man, relationships are hard.
He was thinking of how to properly act. After both he and Nezuko were done in the hot springs, they got out, and made their way back down the hill to the village.